everyone. I'm Linda Cooper, and I'm so excited to welcome you to season two of the New 100 Longevity Campaign. I cannot tell you how much I learned producing this series on season one. Not to mention, of course, the guests that were just so amazing, the brightest scientific minds in the biology of aging who have these incredible advanced cures waiting in the wings for us to cure chronic disease and reverse the aging process simultaneously in some cases. But we're not going to see these come to fruition to market for a while. So I decided to take a different approach for season two because I thought the biggest takeaway that I learned from hearing what all of the guests had to say, the biggest common denominator was learning that most chronic diseases start with inflammation in the body. If we can remove the inflammation in the body, then you can extinguish the fire before it can even fuel the flame. And so this season, it's all about featuring what is available right now that you can take advantage of to biohack your body, to reduce the inflammation and to optimize your health span, lifespan, and support healthy aging. And it's all tools, products, resources, and different healing modalities that you can do right now. So most people, this is not common knowledge, so you probably haven't heard of any of this yet unless you are really doing your due diligence and reading up on everything you possibly can. It's just not common knowledge, but it should be. So to kick things off, our very first episode, we are shining the spotlight on the importance of brain health and to share an optimization tool that is going to blow your mind, literally. It really does. It taps into your brain's full potential. I'm addicted to this, and it's called Braintap. And I try to do this at least once a day, usually in the morning. If I can, I try to fit it in at night to help me sleep better. But it is truly amazing. And it is the brainchild of our guest today, Dr. Patrick Porter, who's devoted his life's work to neuroscience and brainwave entrainment. He's an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and he's got over 30 years of experience in this field. And through his brain tapping technology, this is truly incredible because it brings your brain to its full potential through light, sound, and frequency. And it's been scientifically proven to help people overcome stress, insomnia, lose weight, stop smoking, pain management, accelerate learning. The list goes on and on. It's truly phenomenal, but I'm gonna let him tell you all about it. So let's welcome Patrick to the show and get started. Hi, Dr. Porter. So great having you with us today.
Great being here, Linda. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to get started. Why don't you first share with all of us a little bit about your background and how Braintap came into fruition?
Well, my background in this kind of technology started actually when I was a child. My dad taught us through a technology-driven meditation. So it's kind of been in the background of my life ever since I was 12 years old. And I created my very first affirmation tape at that time at 12 years old.
Then
I've been doing it ever since. And then I was blessed to be a part of a research team back in the 80s called Light and Sound Research, where we created the very first portable light and sound machine. And I've been just evolving that process. In 2013, we created a company called Braintap. My clinical background is in psychology, but my love and passion is electronics. So I was able to put these two together in this technology and do something that I really love. And I like to inspire people the way it inspired me to improve the quality of my life.
Amazing. Well, brain health is just so important. And I don't think people realize that your brain can change at any time of your life. It doesn't have to stay the same, right?
Yeah, we've done research with people who are centenarians, and we had great results with 101, 102-year-old brains, getting them to actually change, improve neurological function by up to 30% after 30 days. And people thought, wow, our brains are fixed, but that's not true. Any brain can change at any age.
And you've also done some Alzheimer's studies, because I've been doing my research.
Yes.
And you've been able to improve their capacity in some way. How does that work?
Yeah, what they call it in science is called neuroplasticity. So think of it like neuron connections are like little computers that are connected together, and they get to produce more energy, more data, more access to information. And we were able in a 6-week time period to take people who are on the dementia scale, get them off the scale, but most importantly, give them more energy. When we talk about neuroplasticity, it's energy in the brain. So the more energy, the better we can transact information, the more capable we are of changing gears. Let's say we get something happens to us where we stress out in the morning. How quickly can we recover? In this study, we found that we could take women 55, 65 that are on the dementia scale and get them to have a 58% recovery score improvement, which means that they don't stay stuck in those stress states as long. So it's pretty incredible. Now it's in a full-blown study at Seminole College down in Florida. So we'll be reporting on that hopefully within the next year.
Amazing. Well, this is all done through your Braintap technology. So please share with us, what does that entail exactly?
Well, the Braintap technology is twofold. One, just on an app. So you can download the app, use your own earphones, and it's going to use sounds, specialized sounds that will balance the brain and actually create brain function and train the brain. We call it brain fitness. We did a study just recently where we showed just music and music with the Braintap encoding. With just music, you get a good response of relaxation, but at the end, you go right back to the stressors. But when you put the algorithm background, we found it took up to 72 hours to return back to that stress state if you didn't do anything between. So that's why we recommend like once a day doing this exercise is good, twice is better, and 3 is excellent. So the sound part is really important. But if you want to upgrade that experience, what we have is we have a headset.
Yes.
And the headset, as you see here, now there's two things you can see, the lights in the ears. People go, why do you have lights in the ears? And why are you flashing lights in my eyes? Well, your brain actually, to stay awake and alert during this process, we need to engage your sight, because your sight actually controls 30% of your hearing. So if we have this flashing response, the brain stays awake, and that means this frontal lobe. As we get older, unfortunately, what happens is our voltage or our energy in our frontal lobe, which has executive capacity, it starts to diminish. That's why we get forgetful. People say a senior moment, but the reality is it's just an energy moment. Our brain doesn't have the energy to do it, and we're not. So it's more than just Braintap to really rebuild and repair the brain. But the main thing is we need to get energy into the brain so it can do its work. And so the light is photic energy. And one thing I always like to say in my interviews is that we are light beings. It's not an expression or a metaphysical concept any longer. Science proves in 2 ways that we're light beings. Number one, we have receptors on our cells called chromophores that absorb light energy. And then it uses it in the body to restore, rebuild, and replenish the body's energy levels. And number 2, every strand of DNA, the 100,000 more, maybe even 1 trillion strands of DNA, all are pulsating with light. And actually every 40 seconds it emits a pulse. And if we don't have the energy in our cells, our cells don't get the right information. And what I mean by that is something called epigenetics. We used to think that we were destined to live out our mom and dad's genetics, but now we know that when they mapped the human genome in 2003, they only mapped 1% of it. Yeah. Because the other 99% changes every 40 seconds. So if we give the body the energy it needs, we can show up as our best self. So energy through the ears. In Chinese medicine, they have something called meridians. Yes. And so what we want to do is, how can we open up meridians in the body? We put light into the ears, it follows through and actually traces throughout the whole body through something called photobiomodulation. So the body absorbs energy, transmutes that information through us, almost like fiber optics through our dura and the fiber systems of the body. So we're not just electrical, we have light moving through us all the time.
Yes, yes. Well, and there's also lights for the goggle part as well, though I don't have that part on right now.
Yeah. So yeah, those only turn on when you have the app going.
Yes.
And those are actually tuned to the sound frequency. So what's happening in the right ear is actually happening in the left eye, and vice versa, because we're creating cross-lateral training or programming. Because as we get older again, some things happen in our brain that we don't like. Number one is one hemisphere of the brain slows down before the other. And if the left hemisphere slows down too much, we can create anxiety, stress, fear, and anxiety. In fact, it's so much so that the Brazilian government, right as we're talking right now, is doing a research study using their own funding, $250,000, to prove that Braintap is a digital drug to help people with anxiety, fear, depression, sleep disorders, because we balance the brain in as little as 6 weeks. And we're about halfway through that study, and it's just going fantastic. They're doing blood draws. It's a full-blown study,
wow.
just like you do for medicine. And the best part of it is that it's all being done by a third party, so that we can use that when we come back to America with all that evidence to our own FDA and get us certified that way.
I think that's phenomenal. I love to be able to back the information with scientific data. And I know that that is something that's on your website as well, that shows the science. So we can definitely direct the viewers to be able to check that out as well. And I love that there's different elements. A lot of people haven't heard of binaural beats. So maybe share with us what that is, because that's one of the elements too.
Right. One of the things that people don't realize is that our brains are actually tuning devices for our environment. So whatever environment you're in Chinese medicine, they call it feng shui, because they know the ancient art of placement. We feel better when we have certain things in certain orders. Yeah. But science has taken it to the next level and says, hey, everything in the universe is vibrating and teeming with energy. So we respond to it. So what we want to do is, how can we get the brain into these more resourceful states like alpha and theta? Well, we can do it with binaural beats by putting in a frequency in one ear. Let's say we put 200 hertz frequency in one ear, a 210 in the other. Now, to use binaurals, you have to be wearing earphones. So just so you understand that. And then the brain doesn't hear the 200 or the 210. The brain actually hears a phantom sound of 10 hertz frequency. And then the brain matches that frequency. So we're always matching our frequency. We all have friends that won't go shopping at Christmas time in the malls because it's too crazy, too frenetic for them.
I get claustrophobic. I can't.
Right. Definitely. So you're probably more sensitive than other people. So that means when you get into an environment, you're actually, like, people will say, I don't get a good vibe about that person or whatever. We're all picking up that all the time.
Oh, I'm hypersensitive. I can actually feel people's auras. Like if somebody has a really bad, like black aura, it repels me backwards. Like I've had that happen when I'm just walking down a street and a person passes me and I'm like, oh, I need the sage.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing about that is that they now know that you can measure our field, our heart field. Our heart resonates a field of energy about 18 feet away from us. So when you get in there, and we're sharing information in that field. So that's why we know that the people we hang out with, they affect our genes, just like the foods we consume or the books we read or the TV shows we watch. All of that is either upregulating our system to function and work better, or if we're watching fearful things, stressful things, it's downregulating our system.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said with birds of a feather flock together, because you want to be surrounded by like-minded beings. Okay, so the binaural beats you've explained, but there's so much that goes into this. I was sharing with the viewers that I love to do this in the morning. I try to do it at night. It's just sometimes for helping me sleep, but I love the guided meditations where it's taking me on a journey through Egypt or a journey of the soul. And there's so many to choose from. And I think that those are so valuable because sometimes it's hard for me to get into a meditative state. And so this just kind of like does it for me.
Right. What we're doing is we're keeping the attention of our consciousness, because we're always taking in so much information. We think it's only like watching TV and talking to our spouse or our girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. But the reality is that our brain is always taking in all this information. They say 25,000 sounds we hear every second we process, 2,000 pieces of visual cues we take in. So our brain is really sorting it all out. So we can get stressed out. But then when we start to slow down our brain, that's sometimes when we get in touch with that monkey mind, and that's a distraction. So what we're doing is we're teaching the brain to stay on track, on target, without you having to do it. It's kind of like when we go to the ocean, we can't help but relax, and mainly because the ocean itself.
That's my happy place. That's where we first met, was actually at the beach house rental. I was talking to you with the sound of the ocean waves crashing behind me, and it's like, that's my zen. I mean, I have to go there. I get landlocked because I'm here in Dallas, so I have to get my beach fix a lot because I'm a California girl. But that to me is like, and that actually is part of, there's a program that actually takes you to the beach and to the mountains, and to be in
Yeah, we
that
have
space.
different stress reduction ones where we take you what we call mental vacations, because really we need to get outside ourselves every once in a while. It's a natural propensity that all animals have, really, not just people. We want to escape from that stress, really that low level chronic stress that we're under pretty much all the time. Even when things aren't so bad out there in the political environment, we still feel the stresses because we still have that limbic brain that's kind of controlling us. And people think they sometimes think their body's against them, but really it's just trying to protect them, but it doesn't know how to relax, doesn't know how to disengage from all that fear and frustration and get into those states of joy and compassion and gratitude.
Yes, 100%. So what is the definition actually for binaural beats? Is there a definition that you could provide?
Well, the definition of a binaural beat is two sounds presented through a medium, which we would say earphones now, that are at different octaves, and the brain actually processes the phantom sound. Now, they used to do this. Everything that I do used to be an ancient tradition. So if people are wondering, has this ever happened before? Well, think about Tibetan bowls. And anybody who's ever seen those Tibetan bowls,
yes.
Yeah, singing bowls. So they used to be able to help people that were having mental illness before all the technology. They used to have people lay down they would ring these bowls. Now, the bowls actually have a frequency. So they knew when in this meditative state, when you get into that meditative alpha theta state, so they could ring a bell that was an alpha bowl and ring a bell that's a theta bowl. And what would happen is the brain, because they're on both sides of the head, would create this binaural effect. And the reason it's binaural is you're hearing two different sounds, but the brain only hears one. So it's kind of magical the way it happens. And so we do the same thing with light as well. So whatever's going on with sound, we're doing it with photic energy through the eyes, and then we're bathing the ears with a certain frequency, because we also use frequency response. Yes. There's something called Noget frequencies, and there's a whole series. There's series for solfeggio frequencies that are backed with brainwaves. So we have a lot of different variety for anyone into sound, light, and vibration healing. That's what we do with the headset.
Yes. And for the audience, because, a lot of them are very new to this, and I'm actually going to be featuring Clint Ober on the show. He wrote the book Earthing. I think you know him. Yes. And mm-hmm. I've got a grounding pad that I'm like, my feet are on right now. We are energy, and our body responds to frequencies. And so there's different healing frequencies, including the planet Earth, which can heal the body and remove inflammation. So I'm excited to feature that's actually the second episode. You're the first. But tell us about how you're using sound frequency specifically with Braintap.
Well, one way we're doing it is most adults, unfortunately, are missing theta. With 2/3 of America not sleeping, and they say now that's the world, then they're not able to get into that deep delta where you can cleanse and really detox your brain. There's something called the glial lymphomic system that only triggers during deep level 4 sleep. If you're not getting that deep sleep, you're not cleansing your brain. So what we do is we introduce a theta wave, and we guide them from theta down into delta. And the more we can increase their theta, the more they're going to produce a neurotransmitter called GABA. GABA is the precursor to DMT. In your audience heard me right. DMT is actually the drug that is the one that helps you to hallucinate or have spiritual dreams and discoveries.
Wait a minute, is that similar to ayahuasca? That's
what happens. DMT is a part of the ayahuasca journey, but our brain actually makes it itself. So you can take the beverage, and we do a lot with, one of the things we did right there in Dallas with Dr. Rosenthal, who's right there in your hometown, we did a psilocybin study where we took vets that were having the stress disorder, PTSD, right? And they wanted to see what would happen if you use Braintap with a psilocybin. And we always have a saying, you can't have the pill without the skill. So you not just take the psilocybin, but what are they going to do after it? So, but we had a number of the vets that did not want to take a psilocybin because they were addictive. Right? They're not addictive really, but they were afraid they'd get addicted to a psilocybin. So I said, well, let's do some brain scans. I mimicked the brain scans of those people on ayahuasca. It was like a psilocybin journeys, which is very similar to ayahuasca. Okay. And I created Braintap frequency responses like that. And people were having journeys. So if somebody has the Braintap, they can go to the Gamma series. And some people have those kind of mystical
That
experiences
has
without.
not happened to me. I wish that I could say it has, because I've done the gamma entrainment. The audience needs to learn more about the different brain waves. So what each one is and what they do.
So I'll talk about them and how Braintap helps them or diminishes them. If you have too much beta, which is what we're talking right now, then you'll have anxiety, fear, frustration. We need to have a balanced brainwave, or we call a full spectrum brainwave. So 45% of your brain while you're awake should be in beta. This helps you to transact information, respond. But if you have too much, you worry, you have stress and anxiety. So what we're going to do is we're going to downregulate that brainwave and increase the alpha brainwave. Now, alpha would be associated with your creativity, your intuitiveness, and to really have a balanced brainwave should be 30% alpha, because even when we're here talking, you're intuitively speaking, communicating, doing your thing. And of course, the more you do something like you've been on television, so you're comfortable in front of the camera, the biggest fear out there is not the fear of dying anymore. It's the fear of public speaking. So, and that's because
and I don't understand it, because that's just not who I am. But I know that is so, so frightening for so many people. So do you help them with that?
We have a whole program for that. And the reason that they're having that biggest fear is their brain shuts down alpha activity. And without alpha, you can't speak. So you know what you need to say, but you can't get your body to do it. And we did a study with autistic children that are missing or lacking or very low alpha. And as soon as we got their alpha activity to about 23%, they started speaking 90% of them. So we kind of correlated alpha with and the research kind of validates that. So alpha is really important. And if you need to create a spark, like in the life mastery program that we have, the protocol, we have a lot of creativity sessions there. So a lot of creative people listen to that series to keep the spark going. When you get into theta, which I've already talked a little bit about, you need high theta while you're going to sleep, or you won't sleep, because you can't just jump from being awake to sleep. You kind of go through it's an analog process. So theta is for the inventive mind. All the research shows that the great inventors, from Tesla to Einstein to anyone else out there, you'll notice that they always would go into these cat naps, and they would come out, they'd have a problem in their lab, and they'd wake up with a solution. What they say is it comes from the unconscious to the conscious mind through the gateway of theta. So the more theta you have, the more inventive problem solver you'll be. And that also correlates with a higher brainwave called gamma that we talked a little bit about. They don't really know a lot about gamma yet, other than they predispose that it breaks down amyloid plaque, and if it's working correctly, you won't get Alzheimer's. And that's because it's the bass drum it's kind of the bass drum. It keeps the rhythm and cadence of the whole brain. So if you don't have that 40 hertz frequency going, then the brain kind of dysregulates. Now, delta is the only brainwave where you're not consciously aware of your surroundings. So when you go into delta, you become non-local, we call it, because you're somewhere, but you're not there.
That's when you're in your deepest sleep, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you fall asleep in front of the TV and somebody tries to wake you up and you can't move, then you're probably in deep delta. It's probably best to let them, in about 15 minutes, they would move, because the cycles happen. You'll go back and you'll cycle back through. And each of these brain waves.
Good to know for my husband, who often falls asleep in front of the TV. I will do that. Yeah. Oh, that's a great tip.
Part of the key to the brain waves, which is more important, is that each of the brain waves actually signals our gut, which is our second brain, to produce neurotransmitters. And if we don't get these brain waves correct or flow through them, especially during sleep, we don't wake up with all the neurotransmitters we need. And that's why the big study's going on in Brazil, because we can upregulate 54 different neurotransmitters and downregulate the stress hormones. Now, we find it works best if you do at least one session a day. But in the study we talked about, the dementia study, that was 3 times a day. So just to make it clear, if somebody's got an issue, they should do it a little bit more time.
Right. Well, I haven't heard you mention yet about the heart-brain coherence. And I know that's really important. And according to Dr. Greg Braden, he has a breathing exercise that you can do to get you to gamma, which is really beneficial.
Right. And we actually are including more breathing techniques. You should look at your app. They're going to be coming in. We have a guy named Pavel who specializes in that as well for different brainwave states. But yeah, your breathing, actually I have 2 studies that just were published at PubMed this year on Kriya breathing, which is one of the things that Dr. Braden talks about. He doesn't call it Kriya breathing, but they're yogic breathing. And we actually can affect alpha activity in the frontal lobe, because we're looking for how can we help the elderly as we get older, how can we keep our brain to be in shape? And breathing is a key part of it. Now, when we're talking about coherency, most people have heard of heart rate variability now because they have a smartwatch or a ring or something like that. But what we know is there's a brain in our heart. We have 4,000 different cells, they call them neutrino cells, that actually communicate. Your heart communicates twice as much to the brain between your ears as this brain in your head talks to your heart. And this one controls the show. So if you don't have good coherence, which means they're communicating properly,
right,
then it's going to dysregulate, and you're going to have anxiety, stress, fear, and it's going to break down eventually into the neurohormonal system. Also show with good coherence, your metabolism is increased. And so
that's
your energy is increased. Your meridians, the meridians of the body, the energy centers of the body, all this flow increases throughout the body, and we can measure it through we have something called NeuroCheck here at Braintap. We worked with the Russian scientists who invented heart rate variability. And we said, we wanted some nice graphics. So we show people, hey, what happens, especially through breathing. Breathing can so alter the heart-brain connection that we recommend a breathing exercise before everybody goes to bed. It's a very simple, I'll mention it here if you don't mind, just so everybody knows.
Yeah, please do.
What you do is you breathe into the mental count of 4, you breathe out to the mental count of 8. And when you do that, when you're going to sleep at night, you scan your body. We call this body scan. When you do that, what happens is you unwind the stress of the day and you're exercising your nervous system. When we breathe in, we're actually triggering our sympathetic system, or that fight or flight. So you might get a little nervous at first because you've never done that before. But you notice when people are angry, upset, they breathe high. When you're relaxed and you're comfortable having a good time, you breathe deep. That's because you're engaging that parasympathetic. And if you exercise your nervous system every night before you go to sleep, number one, you're going to get rid of all that excess stress. You're going to sleep deeper, but you're going to have more energy in the morning because your body's not fighting to get rid of that extra energy.
One of the things that was really helpful for me was your pain management sessions, because I actually broke my right wrist when I was a teenager. And so I have issues with that now. And so there was a couple different sessions where you are targeting, and you're like thinking, I think it's white. I don't know how you come up with that, but you'll have to explain why it's that. But it helps.
Well, there's a few scientific reasons. We just like we have DMT receptors, we have opioid receptors. That's why opioids, we can use them and it reduces pain. But the problem is we get addicted. We never form an addiction to our own internal pharmacy. So when we see the color white, we've all had it, like we get hit in the head, we see the color white. That's because it's our natural, that's the color our brain makes when we have this opioid release. So that's our brain actually releasing opioid. Our opioid receptors are being released and the neurotransmitters follow that downregulate the pain. Now, pain only happens in the beta brainwave. So when you're stressed or anxious or nervous, pain will get worse. So we've done studies where we've taken people that had, let's say, botched surgeries, and we showed that by using Braintap, we could help them to downregulate their beta, upregulate alpha and theta, because there's no pain in those brainwave states. And if we can increase it, they get a greater threshold for pain. And we found that they could be pain-free for 24 hours because they train their body to release its own neurochemicals. And the greatest pharmacy is not on the corner. It's actually between our ears. All medicine, this is something most people don't realize, that medicine itself does nothing. It's inert, but it's our body's reaction to that medicine that does the result. So if we can find out what the reaction is, we can train the body to do it without the medicine. In fact, there's never been a medicine ever created that beat out the placebo.
I was just going to say the placebo effect. That's why they have called it that. That's amazing. Well, the brain is so powerful. We are not using nearly to its full capacity. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I think we use 100% of the brain, but we don't use 100% of its potential. We don't know what the potential is. Our brain is working, but it's kind of like having a Ferrari and we keep taking it down 25-mile-an-hour streets. When we can get it on the Autobahn, we can let it loose. There's been so many, I've seen in my life experience since doing this for over 35 years, I've seen such magic happen. And it really, even though they were using our device or doing something with us, it was really within them. We have a self-healing self-regulating nervous system. And if we take the stress out of the way, we take the toxins out of the environment, we eat healthy, we get good sleep, we exercise, our bodies know what to do. And the problem is we get caught up in the stress syndrome that's happening right now, and we forget to take care of ourselves.
Yes, yes. Well, we're basically updating our own software by using Braintap. So let's go into some more of the healing modalities that you have seen in the scientific research behind the benefits.
Well, one of the things we found was with learning. So just because a lot of people, there's been this uptick in ADD, ADHD, and it has to do with our diets and how basically we're being trained out of our concentration and focus. When you look at now, they're going on social media, you watch a 15-second reel. I mean, that's all the attention people have, just 15 seconds. That's all you have. So right, that's terrible. So what we're talking about is we can, and that also is the perfect, remember I was talking about the perfect brainwave for being awake. Now for learning, the more alpha and theta we can induce during the learning sequence. So in music, they've done a lot of research about this. They call it the Mozart effect. So when you play music in the background, while you're playing the music, you're going to downregulate, have more alpha activity, which means you're going to have more memory, focus, and concentration. So if you're reading a book, attending a class, whatever you're doing, that can add to the value.
Wow.
So we just did a piece of research here. It was a 45-minute session we did. In our pilot study that's now in a 150-person study at down in Valencia College in Florida. We have 11 universities doing research right now. So I'm not going to mention them all, but I'll mention the ones that are relevant.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's great.
And what we did was we took 5 minutes. We did their heart rate variability. We want to know how their heart was communicating. We did EEG at the same time. So during this 45 minutes, we're tracking all of that. First 5 minutes was just to get the baseline. 15 minutes of the music. And of course, it down-regulated just like you'd think it would. But at the end of that 15 minutes, every person in our pilot study went right back to their stress response. It's as if they had the experience. It was like going on vacation and they had this great vacation. When they came back, all the stress was still there. They didn't learn anything. We took that same piece of music 5 minutes later. Now they didn't get up. This was all done at one time. They listened to that same piece of music, but this time we embedded our algorithm into the background of the music. And with the Braintap algorithm in the background, we found out after 15 minutes, they didn't return back to their normal stress state. In fact, it didn't, for the first 24 hours, it didn't change at all. So we actually trained the brain to stay in that learning place without the stress. It took 72 hours to get it back to its what we call baseline status. Now, if you do a session every day, that's why we recommend every day doing something, you will keep up-regulating that. Now, we don't heal cancer. I don't want people,
right.
What we do
there's
is
no healing as far as chronic disease, but you can 100% take away the inflammation in the body. That's one of the main causes of all these chronic diseases is inflammation in the body. I was actually saying that in my intro.
Yeah. So what we do is we can see when we scan somebody, if you have a high degree of delta, we know you have a lot of inflammation. So whatever the disease is, it's usually triggered by inflammation, like you're saying. So what we show is that we can downregulate that. We can upregulate the feel-good hormones that make you feel good, and then you can handle whatever therapy you're going through better. We have one called Coping with Cancer, which we work with oncology centers to do. We have one where people work with natural medicine practitioners that say no to cancer. And that's where I'm saying we've had magic happen, but it's the individual doing it. It's our own body's innate intelligence. If we can get out of the way, our body can do magical things to heal us. Now, mostly people are telling us or responding to us saying, hey, I'm losing weight. The average person loses about just under a pound a week using Braintap for weight loss. So
well, that's a selling point right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you do a diet, like if you do a keto diet, we have a whole program for keto. We have programs for other like to get rid of candida, which is a sugar infestation, or a yeast infestation that's driven by sugar. Sugar is what's really killing our society as far as nutrition goes, because everything has it in it. Even when you don't think you're eating sugar, they figured out a new name for it. And it shows up 4 or 5 times on the label, and you got to stay up to date. And personally, I don't want to be a nutritionist, but I want to know what I'm eating.
Right.
So you read the labels, then you got to do the research. So I think the biggest thing we do, and one of the positive things, so you don't have to just have a problem to use Braintap. We just finished a research project that's being published with Seminole College's golf team. The female golf team, they became national champions again. We helped them, and we actually showed that we could improve their focus and concentration. And these are elite athletes. So usually you don't see that big of a value in it. But I think the biggest reason we help with sports like the Olympians and the pro athletes is recovery. We need to get our body out of that stress response. So like Kansas City Sport, which uses, they put a 20 station brain tapping room in their facility in Kansas City, because after practice, we showed them that you can reclaim up to 80% of the energy you had before practice. So energy,
Wow.
we live in an energy economy. So if we can increase people's energy, they'll have a better life. You can have more time with your family, your friends, whatever you want to do after you have to do what you need to do to survive. You want to have energy left over to do the things you love to do and have fun doing.
Also, besides recovery, wouldn't it be the stress or pressure that I was just thinking of Simone Biles in that particular instance where, an elite athlete who's been doing this over and over again her entire life has this issue. If she was doing Braintap, that might have helped her. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we do know that our thinking affects those genes we were talking about early in the show, where it can downregulate or upregulate. So we want to keep people optimistic, because we know an optimistic brain, everything operates better. And what I've been told many times, I'm too positive. That's why my nickname's Dr. Positive, right? But I said, I'd rather be positive all the time and be disappointed every once in a while than wake up every morning being disappointed all day long and be surprised I'm happy.
Right.
There are people out there that they get up and they're just wondering when the other shoe's going to drop, when is life going to get worse? And I think we need to open up our minds to the possibility that life can get better, and then our brain will make it so.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. I am definitely one of those positive people as well. But one of the things that I've noticed is with my mother, who's been lying to herself about her age for so long that she doesn't even remember how old she is, and she looks decades younger. So there's something to be said with like training the brain to believe a certain thing. You start to feel it and look it.
Yeah. We're now doing more work with Deepak Chopra, and he has a study that I love where he took
I've interviewed him before. I love Deepak.
When he did the study where he took people into the woods, got rid of all their clothing, gave them 1950s clothes. These were 80-year-olds, and only played the music from the 50s. They dressed like the 50s. They could only talk about the 50s. They actually had broadcast to the 50s. They actually showed their telomeres actually reversed, which meant that's one of the ways they measure aging. So your mother might be onto something there.
Yes.
So you're keeping her body young.
Adopt her habits for sure, because it works. It definitely works. And they always say mind over matter, and there's something to that. What haven't we touched on yet that's a benefit factor by using Braintap? We're in COVID still, unfortunately. It's like, when is this ever going to go away? But people are much more stressed, and they're anxious, and there's a lot of unknowns. And to be able to cope with all of that, I think that to do Braintap would be a huge benefit.
Yes, actually, we have a few programs. One is called Putting Future Events into Perspective, because when we take away hope or we take away the future for people, it creates massive anxiety and stress. But in the brain, what happens under low-level chronic stress over time is one hemisphere will slow down over the other. We now know that that's a direct relationship to anxiety, stress, and all the fears, just because the brain works at the speed of thought. So when we want to remember names, we want to places, we want our brain to work efficiently or more than a computer. And when it doesn't, what our brain does through something that neuroplasticity we talked about, if we ask for a piece of information and we don't get it immediately, the brain starts to think it's not available. So it rewires itself so that information is never available. Although everything we've ever seen, heard, or experienced is stored, categorized, and organized by our brain, it's the recall of that information. And there's a science actually called psychoimmunology, which means your psychology affects your immune system. And it's a whole science. It's been around for a long time. We know that the more optimistic, the more happy, the more healthy. In fact, I think his name is Dr. Williams Cousins. He wrote the whole book about laughter therapy, about how people they were healing themselves from all sorts of diseases, especially cancer, by watching comedies. because
Wow.
when we laugh, when we have fun, when we have joy in our life, our body actually creates the healing neurochemicals that go into our body. Now, when we're fearful, stressed, when the Buddha over 5,000 years ago said, "He who angers you conquers you," medical science has proven that to be true, because medical science says when you have a negative thought, a negative experience, your brain has to create the corresponding negative chemical solutions in our brain that then begin to destroy us from the inside. So that's why when somebody says you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought, we now know through science that that's true. We want to be more optimistic. Not that everything's always going to be good, but
Right.
we need to be able to handle that and have the buffering system. When you practice things like Braintap, you create a buffering system so you have a capacity to handle those experiences. You know, the old saying with Michael Tyson is everybody has a plan till they get hit, right? And so that's what happens with people. They think they're going along, but they've never really rehearsed. The story is you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So you'll notice at the end of almost every one of my sessions, I'm having you visualize the next day, the next week, the next month. How are you going to apply this knowledge in your life? Because knowledge alone is not power. Knowledge applied is power. And we want to empower people to have better lives, more healthy lives, more fulfilling lives, so they can have the type of life that they've always dreamed of, because it is within reach. You just have to believe it to be so.
I'm a big believer, and I would like to make it available to the viewers as well. I know that you offer a trial period for Braintap. How does that work?
What they'll do is they'll use the link that you'll provide. They'll download the app to their device. Once they have it, what I recommend they do is they go directly to Start Brain Tapping. There's a demonstration session there where I explain the whole process. So even though we talked about it here, they can put that on with their own earbuds. You can start using it right today as soon as you download it. You also get a free copy of my book, Thrive in Overdrive. So if you didn't catch all the science we were talking about and you want to read more about it, that is a real book. It's not a web book. You can download that, start using it today. You get to keep the book whether you do anything else in the future with Braintap at all.
Thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Linda, for helping us to reach 1 billion brains. That's our goal.
Well, this is important stuff. I really feel that, again, this is a huge benefit that tackles everything to just make a more optimized system for healthy aging, for lifespan, for health span. And thank you for all that you do to making it happen. So,
well, thank you for having me on.
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time on the New 100 Longevity Campaign. Bye.
I'm not backing down, 'cause the future is now. Not backing down, 'cause the future is now.